are you? Like, is this a worship committee? Is this a group of interested people?
Yes.
Interested people that most administrative council.
Some administrative.
5 steps of the vision.
Either administrative council or vision team.
Vision team. So tell me more about the vision team. What's happening with the vision team?
We have, there are, we've 7 people.
Trying to create a vision.
And we're peddling through the 5 areas to create a Bible.
For vital congregations, okay?
Through these learning events.
Okay.
We're trying to create a vital congregation.
Okay.
And the vision team is trying to pick up information that will help them form a vision for this church going forward.
Okay.
And once they're done with that, which will be sometime this fall, then we'll set up a team to implement the vision.
Okay.
So it's going to take us a little while to get done, but
Sure.
this is helping. What we're trying to do here is get some outside information that we would ordinarily have access to about current practices and procedures and what works well, what doesn't work well, and those kinds of things to help inform us as we go forward.
Great. So,
And there are people who wish to do tonight.
good, great. So let me, I just spoke with your pastor about my strategy for tonight. I can't fix worship in an hour and a half, right? And nor do I know what your worship looks like now, because I have not experienced it. Worship is always contextual. It's always about the space and the people who gather there. Now, I understand that you want to develop some worship practices that might invite people who are not here yet. And so what I'd like to do tonight with you, as a vision team, as a worship team, is you're both really fortunate and really unfortunate that I just came from the coaching approach training today. This is a new approach that's being taken in the conference across the boards. And so what I'd like to do today, because we know we're not going to fix it tonight, right? And we know that there's going to be an implementation period, and we know that I can come back, right? Is what I'd like to do tonight is first hear from you what is most critical for you to talk about tonight. And then unpack that some with you, have a theological conversation about worship. I would like to ask some pertinent questions, and then maybe lay out an action plan for the vision team to take on as you start to construct your overall vision involving these 5 areas for vital congregations, none of which are isolated from the others, right? All of them are going to work together. So, how does that sound, everybody?
Sounds good to me.
Does that sound like a good strategy for tonight? Or you look like you were hoping for something
I'm
else?
confused. I thought this was going to be, that we were going to be getting a better read on the worship service. It sounds like we're just factoring in what you do. Is that correct?
No, I mean, we can have a conversation and I'll try to feed some things back to you, but in an hour and a half tonight, I can't give you enough to really move forward with enough substance. Now, I know that some of you have come to the Summer Music and Worship Institute at Drew before. You've been there?
2 years.
And what I've recommended, this is a 2-day intensive institute where you'll have access to all kinds of worship specialists. It's in July. What I've recommended is that if you want more than what you can, I can't possibly give you enough tonight to really move forward in substantive ways. But what I would recommend is that be another jumping off point for you. But what I'm saying is I'm willing to come back. I'm happy to come back and do more consulting with you. But what I need to hear tonight is where you are now and where you're hoping to go. And what I have said to Scott and what he's setting up right now is that I'll take you to the Drew Worship Facebook page, which I invite any of you to visit at any time. We post videos and still photos of all of our worship services, which I think demonstrate the kind of blended worship and the kind of worship aesthetic that you're hoping to create here. Does that sound okay?
Mhm.
Still a little convinced. I'm owing you something more. What's your name? Hi, Jean. I'm glad to meet you. Why don't I hear everybody's names? Would that be okay? Remind me of your name. I know that your face is familiar.
Chris Corda.
Chris, okay.
I'm Jennifer.
Jennifer, hi.
John.
Don, I met you before. I know you. Meryl. Meryl, nice to see you. Wes.
Tom,
Hi, and Charlotte. Right.
and you are?
Tanya. Tanya Linn Bennett. I'm the chaplain and the director of the chapel at Drew University, where I partner with Mark Miller in developing 4 worship experiences, I call them, a week. Each of them somewhat different from the others. We're an ecumenical seminary, so we reflect a variety of denominational approaches. So it's not specifically Methodist worship. We have communion 1 day a week. So let me just ask you, as you come here tonight, what's your primary concern about worship? Or hope for worship?
I'd like to have people feel welcomed.
Is someone being a scribe here?
Yes.
Okay, great.
I'd like to have people feel welcomed and able to participate. I feel like there are many of us who have been here a long time, including myself, who sort of know the rituals, and if you don't know, you can feel lost. I also feel like we're tied to those rituals, and for some, I hate to say this, younger people, they come in and they feel stifled, or it's too stuffy. I'm in between. I like the tradition and the reflection and taking me out of my chaotic world to be in a very a modest space that I can collect my thoughts. However, I don't know if that appeals to everyone, and we are losing ground, and we need to have more people in the pews to feel more alive. That's a lot. That's essentially it.
See, Tanya, sorry, your computer went to sleep, so I need to pass it.
So it's capital TEDMAN 1, 2, 3, 4.
Thank you.
It's my son.
Mayor, I also enjoy the tradition, but I've also been part of churches that are very contemporary. And I love the energy of the room. Sometimes it feels like people are asleep here. And that's a generalization, and maybe they're just being very introspective, but I think there's a whole generation of people out there, and not only younger generations, but I'm talking like a whole group of people out there, just want something more energetic, more audience participation, if you will, of a worship service. And not just sitting and, going by the bulletin where you know everything that's coming. Just some surprises, some, changes each week to kind of wake people up. And so you unexpected stuff happens, like the Holy Spirit shows up.
Okay, yeah.
In this church, we are about properly, our demographics are such that between 35 and 54, we're about the same as the population of us. Over 55, we're overweight. Under 34, we're virtually at. And as has been alluded to, we need to find a way that will attract the young people and help us even to keep the ones that come through confirmation that sometimes get lost and don't appear and those kind of things. Both of our services now, I think we categorize as traditional. James, there's going to be an issue with the church because, some people want to come at 9 and some want to come with 11 and all that kind of stuff. But first problem is what should our worships look like to attract the entire range of population in the area?
It would be great to hear from everybody if you feel like you can.
I just sense that there's making that transition, that we hold on to the traditional service that a lot of people do seem to enjoy, but yet I'm not sure how to go about creating an alternative type of service that might draw other people in without offending some of the people that have been here for 25, 30 years or more. It's something I think we have to do. I'm not sure how to go about doing that.
Yeah, I think those are the basic premise of what every time you go to conference event or on the way, so go to conference events, go to other events. Our task is to make disciples of the transformation. We're not doing it. All right? We've got a group of disciples who are here who may or may not be doing transformational things in or outside the church, but we're not making lots of new disciples. And because of that, we're not living up to our responsibilities as Christians. And to paraphrase the Great Commission, so therefore we need to figure out what we need to do, and whether we like it or not, this is the first touch that most people have in relation to the church. So therefore, it's critically important that as we worship and as we do what we do on Sunday mornings, that it puts us in a position to be able to lead the disciples, not turn people off so that they leave and go back.
So I hear some of the welcoming pieces that you're kind of emerging before. Charlotte, do you want to?
Yeah, I think no matter what type of service you go to, when you leave, you need to have a sense of joy, comfort, peace, to experience the love of God while you're in worship, because it's all about God, not about the ritual or the building or the format. It's a personal relationship and expression of how much you value God, what you bring to worship.
Thank you.
Question.
Yes.
John, you said 144 is virtually passed.
Yeah.
Is that across all Methodist churches, or is that in this church in particular?
That's this church in particular. I went through all the membership records, and I think there's only 2 families. I had birth dates for half the people on the rolls in our system, and only 2 were between, so half of our membership, out of half, only 2 were between the ages of 18 and 34. So, anyone.
You mean any members who show up?
Right. The whole membership roll, I went through. And there were birth dates for about half the people in there.
So that's not counting kids that grew up in this church that are now away at college because we've got another.
I didn't count anybody who was so far away that they, in effect, even though they're on our rolls, couldn't participate.
Okay,
I mean, I just omitted them.
I'm thinking in terms of Zachary and Carolyn Chigaris. They're away at school, so we can't count them.
Right.
As being here all the time.
But they're under 22.
That's right.
They, trust me when I tell you, there's just not as many as you might think.
Still, it's not a huge difference.
Okay. But honestly, the general Methodist Church.
Sure, it's a general denominational problem. It's only here, it's not, the problem isn't only here. I think it's particularly acute here.
Okay.
But
Well, actually, it's not only a denominational problem for the United Methodists, it's a Christian problem.
Yeah.
And it's actually a religious tradition problem. that at least there's a Pew study that you can look up online if you want, and that actually spelled like Pew. It's a foundation that does a lot of religious life surveying and research. But the most recent study says that a third of all people say that they don't believe in anything religious or even spiritual. And 2/3 of what we call millennials, which is the generation that turned adult as of the year 2000, was born around 1982, that 2/3 of them will call themselves not affiliated with any religious tradition. So it's a trend, and it's much broader than worship. It has to do with a rebellion against institutional rules. It has to do with a lot of other factors. And I would, ask you to go to, you can just Google it, and take a look at the broader study. But what you're experiencing is not that unusual. And what I would caution is that we not think of worship as the tool, or the only tool, certainly, that's going to bring in that younger generation. We can't rely on any one aspect of what we do here to do that for us.
But as I think Tom said, this is often the first touch that people have of our church, and so we want to be sure that
My son is involved, very, very involved in things, mostly. And they have a Friday night worship that they call prime time. They don't even call it worship. But it's worship. But it's not like this worship, They go and they have a meal, and they have a speaker, and they sing, and they have activity, I don't even know, but it loves it. He won't miss it. He won't come home on Friday night when there's a prime time, because he adores it, and the kids love it. So, I think that really speaks to the younger generation, more participation rather than just sitting in a pew. They don't connect with that.
we heard from Matthew Knoll, he was talking about how he had people coming from Staten Island, had people coming from as far away as Staten Island every week to his youth activities because they wanted to be there.
So how do you create something that people want to come to, and what do you have to do it with? So part of and do you have the inspiration and the joy to do it? I heard several people say, I know it's something that we have to do. I know it's something that we need to do to draw this younger crowd. I know, is it something that you want to do?
Yes.
Do you know what I'm saying? Is it something you're willing to invest yourself in spiritually to create a welcoming space for people of all ages? And I would also challenge us to think that when we develop worship that's engaging, interactive, interesting, exciting, spontaneous on some levels, that has great music, that has great word, that we're going to speak to a much broader group of people than 18 to 34-year-olds. And one of the things that I experience frequently when I go into places and bring a worship experience that looks different than what is typically happening in sanctuaries like this is that it's 80-year-olds as well as 80-year-olds who are jumping up and down here. So I don't want us to think that we're going to compartmentalize this into an age group. What I want us to think about is something that we're all going to be excited about and be willing to be engaged in. Because if we're not invested in it, if we're not willing to participate in it, we're not going to excite anybody else about it. So I think as we move forward, and of course Scott is really struggling to...
We got it. It's going to work.
We're used to this. We're used to this.
But I think as we move forward, so I've heard now that, okay, we need to create a worship environment that is more welcoming, that is more interesting, that is more engaging. That doesn't mean that you lose things like silence or prayer or tradition. It means that somehow in the framework of what is worship, which has 4 basic components, right? We gather, we hear the word, we respond to the word, and we are sent forth. be disciples of the world. Those are the 4 basic components of worship. Like that happens in your bulletin every week, right? What happens within those 4 basic components can be radically different from week to week. Now, what I'll suggest to you is that to make worship radically different every time you gather, worship is the work of the people. So you're going to have to not hand Scott a bulletin every week and say, put the widgets in the hole. You're going to have to say, this is going to look a little different every time we gather.
How do you mean that? Give me an illustration.
It's scary.
It's not scary. It means
To
that...
some people,
It's scary.
To some people, it's very scary, not to me, but
So let me ask you another question before I even go, what do I mean? Let me ask you another question. What do you risk by moving away from what you do now?
I could see a lot of people here that have been coming for a lot of years being turned off by that because they're used to, this is the way the service is. We've experienced that here with past pastors when they changed the service. And people are like, whoa, what's this? I don't like that. So that's the risk of losing some people.
Yeah, I think part of
We've already done that.
Yeah, and when we were doing our original visioning, and as an administrative council, we do a circle of, is it 10 miles around our church? 5 miles. 5 miles around our church, and I think there's something like, well, in 5 miles, there's like 8 Methodist churches, and in a 10-mile circle, there's something like 18.
And I passed 3 churches coming to this point on Russell
On
Ave.
this block,
Right.
there's 3 churches. Synagogue, there's a gospel church.
Yeah.
One of the things we need to remember is that we're in a generation, we're in a millennial age where denominational loyalty is no longer what draws people to churches. What draws people to churches is what's happening in here. So I'm 4th generation ordained elder in the Methodist tradition. I had a great grandfather who was a circuit rider in Western Pennsylvania. I don't suggest that we move away from the doctrinal ideas that founded and undergird the Methodist Church, but what I do suggest is that the way we express those has to be radically different in this time.
I agree with that, but your premise was it's going to be different every week. That's what I think people are going to have a hard time.
That's why I asked, but give me an example of a change that might happen from week to week.
So what's not going to be different is that you're going to gather, you're going to hear the word, you're going to respond to the word, and you're going to be sent forth with a sense of hope and joy, hopefully. Right? What happens within those 4 components can look different every week. When I say responding to the word, there can be an interactive ritual every week that somehow asks people to be expressive of the way that they've heard what's been said to them. We're in a Protestant tradition which has generally valued the sermon as the height of what we do in worship. Let's decenter that a little bit, and let's have the sermon be an invitation into a time where the people actually respond to what they've heard. Physically, intellectually, verbally, singing, dancing, ritualistically. We remember our baptism, we have communion. All of those things are ritual actions that are the responses to the word. Offerings, stewardship. All of that is ritual action to the hearing of the word. So what leads us up to that moment is preparation for our response. And our response is the discipleship moment that you're talking about, right? So our response is what leads us and inspires us to be the Jesus in the world that the world needs to see, right? So when I'm talking about it'll be a little different every week is what if the opening hymn is not come thou fount of every blessing, but it's something that comes, I don't know what books you have here, I don't know what musical stuff you have here. I heard a great handbell choir when I was walking in. I've seen handbell choirs radicalized by using mallets instead of ringing. So it becomes a percussion handbell choir.
they're starting and that's the chimes, and it's really great.
Yeah, and that's a traditional element that's being
There are
elevated.
songs in here that you sang that I have never heard that some music institute that
Really?
I just fell in love with. Yes. We don't use this enough.
Well, and part of what will radicalize your worship is exploring what you have here. Who can do what here? what? Who do you have who can do different things?
We had liturgical dance.
You have liturgical dance?
We had.
Had. What happened?
They grew up alone.
People with video.
The kids grew up, and then we didn't have any older people or young adults that would want to continue with it.
So, and in that moment, I would say that this is why we need to be responsive to the resource that we have in the room. So no longer could you sustain a liturgical dance group? Okay, that's a ministry that had a season.
Mm-hmm.
What's the next ministry that's going to have a season? And instead of clinging to the things that no longer work, what do we look for? What do we look to develop that we've got good stuff here to work with? Something that we say a lot at Summer Music Institute is you want to do whatever it is you're going to do well. So I've been in a lot of churches that felt they had to start a praise band, that was what was going to draw young people. So what you have, and I'm 50, so believe me, I'm in this crew, is a bunch of 50-year-olds standing up there playing guitars and singing music that's from the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
Right? Which is bad contemporary music that was theologically dumbed down to attract what we thought then would attract a group of people that we thought needed to be brought to church by dumbing down our theology and offering them this watered down message that, Jesus loves you and that's all you need to know.
And you get other kids and you alienate the older people in the congregation that have traditional.
Because you moved a drum set into the chancel, right? So the question is, what can you do well with what you have here that is going to draw a crowd and excite all of you?
I mean, I think we have a very innovative music director. So I think he would be open to be able to do this in various new areas in terms of the music.
We have a strong music tradition in this church.
Yeah.
And there's lots of folks around, past, present, and hopefully future. It's a strong tradition.
May I interject something? This is not the church that I knew 5 years ago.
Say more.
It is nowhere near the church that I knew 5 years ago. We then had a very regimented type of service, not regimented. We would have maybe the choir was having kind of a spiritual kind of anthem, or maybe we'd have something that was different, but it was simple to sing with, simple to hear the words. It was the words were what was carried as well as the tune. A lot of the stuff in the faith we sing is one verse that you repeat 3, 4, 5 times. Sanctuary is one. I mean, I love it once. I don't love it every week.
Well, you're right there.
Go through a days where we're singing sanctuary every first hymn, every week after week. And that got well, it has changed drastically. So we can't say this is the way the church has always been. It isn't. It is completely different now.
But it does have a strong musical tradition, though.
It does have a strong musical tradition.
A very strong classical music tradition, because even Kevin carries more of a classical tradition.
Well, so you've lifted up, there are several fairly simple, theologically strong praise songs in here. There are also plenty of hymns in here that are traditional, that have different tunes than you might be used to, that have multiple verses, Come Away With Me, that traditional spiritual.
One of the things that I've heard repeatedly is Methodist like to do 2 things. You like to sing and like to eat. And the worst thing that can happen on any Sunday is if you have more than one hymn that is not related to you. That's a big one. And people really want to be able to sing. And I'm sitting here in this church and I'm here and her. They're not singing. That's not praising God. That's not singing.
And I would echo that. I got a letter notice I got calling to my attention from a valued member of the congregation who works very hard and that she had heard from a lot of folks, disappointment that we have so many songs that you can't sing, which is what she's saying. So these are the currents that go back and forth.
Yeah, so one of the things that I like to do, so you can go a lot of directions with this, right? You can develop a Friday night service. One of the big, fastest growing spiritual movements, it's not a religious movement, is Sunday Assembly, it's called. It was started in London, Sunday Assembly. It's a Sunday evening gathering, a fellowship gathering that features a comedian who brings some sort of spiritual message in a comedic way.
But he's not funny.
They've got, so if you go to Facebook and Drew Worship, you'll find our Drew Worship Facebook page. Good job, Scott.
Hey, Scott.
That's a question I've been struggling with, because we tried to create a service here that was marginally supported by the church.
Correct.
Marginally supported by the pastor.
Marginally supported by the pastor.
True.
And it felt miserable. We had an associate pastor who struggled with it. Because the associate left who was running it.
Right, and there was nobody to run it.
There was nobody to
The
run it.
senior pastor didn't want
The
to
nature,
begin with, so.
around that comment, the question is, must we do change within the context of what we do now? Or can we do change in the context of what we do now? Or must we do something different to offer an alternative to reach out to the disciples? And that's what we're about. How do we
An alternative service?
Yeah, do we need to do an alternative service, or do we need to incorporate it into our Sunday worship, or do we need to do both? And I think that's some of the things that we kind of have to work out.
I think need might not be the question. I think want. What do you thirst for? What are you desiring? What are you really willing to invest yourselves in, not only by assigning a group of people to do it, which, by the way, doesn't work. If you want to really start something like this, you need to find the people who are passionate, who want to do it, and they might not be people you ever thought of before. It might be a matter of extending an invitation saying, we're looking for a design team that will come together and stretch us as wide as we can go to think about how we might do a different kind of worship than what we're doing right now. Now, whether you decide to assign one of the two traditional services that you're doing on Sunday mornings right now to that place, and I will tell you, if you want 18-year-olds in your pews worshiping, I would do 9 a.m.
Especially in the second
10 o'clock because before they can eat their breakfast after taking their morning pills. It's a lose-lose.
Well, I would invite us to start using really positive language around this. Just because if you're not excited about it, no one's going to get excited about it. So if this is not where you want to go, then don't even try it. You know, and I'm not excusing you from this conversation right now, but I'm saying, if as the vision team, you're not bringing an enthusiastic perspective, optimistic
Yeah,
perspective.
but you asked us the question.
Some of them are.
You asked us the question, what's the danger of doing this? So that's our response to the danger of doing it.
So let me ask you
Now that I'm done with that, I can actually engage in the conversation here and kind of catch up to where we were. But you're asking what it is that we're looking for. And this is kind of just a cross-section of folks in the church who are very interested in what we're doing, what we can learn. And my feeling is that really we want to try to accomplish two things, I think, especially in regards to worship. We want to honor the traditions of the church and the people who brought us this far in the church. But I think we're looking for an alternative type of worship that may be attractive to another demographic that we're yet to identify, but we're looking to explore different options. And we're not looking for something to compete with one another or to supplant one or the other. But I guess we're trying to look at how can we do what would be better? And what would be the types of options and ways that we could provide alternative settings, and I think you're starting to get to that, as you want to list what existing, you want to go at different time, things like that. And if that's what you guys covered while I was doing this, I apologize.
I was talking about
Well, that's usual, so.
You know, so I asked, what do you risk if you do this? Let me ask the opposite question. What do you risk if you don't do it? Yeah.
yeah,
Shutter the church closed.
A slow dwindling. It wouldn't appear like that, way we're running out of money, we're gonna have to change not drastic things that are not, that we're become accustomed to. But I think it's just that whole idea of a slow dwindling, which we've been, suffering from for probably the last 15 years, but yet really came to play in a crisis situation that occurred over the last
2 years.
The last 2 years, we've had a crisis, a significant drop in attendance and giving.
And you related that to?
It had to do with pastoral change, it had to do with changes in the music program, a lot of things all at once, way too fast, whatever. It's past history, we're moving forward, we're looking forward at this point. But the history is that there's been a drastic reduction. So therefore, we're, when Scott's been on board for 6 months, 8 months, whatever.
Almost like a lifetime.
But, I think our focus is changing from what caused the problem to how we address it. And I think a lot of us,
And I think we're still trying to mend some fences within our church family. We are very fortunate that we have longtime members, but longtime members have long memories. And unfortunately, we had some significant infighting. And we are still recovering from that. We come to church on Sunday, but we are not always of the Christian heart or Christian mind. And that has been, I think, the toughest thing for me, frankly, is just showing up. There have been weekends that I have not wanted to come.
and somebody said, I forget, it was Jennifer or Merrill, about there needs to be an energy or a welcoming attitude here, and I think if we don't do this, we're going to risk losing that. We need some real energy, some real worship where people are enthusiastic about being here, about spreading the word of Jesus Christ. We're going to lose that if we don't do something different than what we're doing.
And I think, a real success was our glorious Easter service.
Yeah.
I had half my household is Catholic, and I was in the group. They thought if they closed their eyes, they were in an African American church in Brooklyn. And I laughed and I said, because we were singing so much, that's what we do. Like, we're enthusiastic and we're excited and we have so much to be excited about. That's where we need to be every week. We need to be there every week with not only the message of Easter, but the message of hope and joy and peace and the wanting to be with the people that you don't know but that are next to you.
And in that regard, one of our real strengths is Pastor Scott. I mean, he has a very open attitude, and he has a vision as to where we should head in terms of these things. And we really haven't had that here in a long time.
So I think what you're talking about is spirit. And spirit doesn't just show up on Easter. Spirit shows up whenever Spirit's here. Are we willing to open our hearts to that spirit? And are we willing to do that whether we're offering a cup of tea that serves you best or whether we're offering one that serves you best? And are you willing to wait for your cup to come if it's not right in front of you? That's one of the ways that I explain doing the kind of worship that I think is going to best work for you, which is not an alternative, it's not contemporary, which I just can't. Contemporary makes me because we're really in recovery mode from contemporary. Contemporary didn't offer people stuff that made them stay. Contemporary offered sort of what I will borrow from Kenda Creasy Dean and other writers who talk about the millennial age, a therapeutic moralistic deity, which was you come for a day, we do a self-help session, and you go home, but we don't have you become part of the community. We don't offer you any kind of authentic glance at what it means to be a disciple, or to believe in something that truly is bigger and better than we are.
Maybe you've been to the wrong kind of contemporary service.
Well, they're all over the map, but the word bears some, it carries a lot of connotations that are not as deep as we might like.
I think John shared a good term at the last council meeting, less formal, is that?
Yeah, that's formal, that's the conference, the DCM and those folks, they're using the term less formal.
Because contemporary changes with the day. What's
Sure.
contemporary today is not contemporary yesterday.
Right.
I say it turns out schizophrenic.
And I don't even really know what less formal
I don't know
means.
either.
I mean,
They're recognizing that term as a negative pejorative context.
the term that I use is emerging. You may have read about emergent church, which are churches that spring up in warehouses and bars and all kinds of places that are alternative locations. But I think you can bring emerging worship into a very traditional space. And for me, emerging means blending the very best of our tradition with the very best of what's new. And sometimes it means reshaping the very best of our tradition to appeal to people who don't have the vocabulary of the church, or who have not been steeped in our traditional hymns and don't know. I mean, if you think it's a turn off for people who have been here as members forever to sing a song they don't know, think about walking into space and singing 4 songs you've never heard before. Or reading a creed that half the language doesn't mean anything to you. One of the reasons I got inspired about reshaping liturgical elements for this age is because I was teaching a confirmation class, and in the Let's Save the Name confirmation curriculum, when you do the Christian history with them, the last piece is, what would your favorite church look like? And they can just list whatever they want. And the first thing that my confirmation class said was use words that we understand. What are we doing to young people when we bring them into a space and we, week after week after week, recite a liturgy that they don't understand? That to me is manipulative. That's not offering them a faith journey that they can be engaged in. So one of the things, John, when I talk about what looks different every worship service at Drew is a different kind of call to worship. Sometimes it's spoken, sometimes it's sung, sometimes it's moved, sometimes we do the passing of the peace right at the front, sometimes we wait until after we've done the confessional prayer, which would be very traditional, right? That's where the reconciliation comes in. So, but startling people with a sense of spontaneity and surprise doesn't necessarily alienate them if you can make it thematic and make it work all the way through. Where you lose people is if you throw in something, an element, strictly for that startle or surprise, and then don't follow it up with any sense of anything that looks like a touchstone that they can cling to. And we will always have those touchstones, right? We will always have, I can't imagine very often that you don't say the Lord's Prayer in your Sunday mornings at some point, right? It's a touchstone, right? And you teach it to your kids during children's time or however you do that. But to keep the very traditional elements, ancient elements, but then to change up some of the other aspects around it. And one of the ways that you can do it that will not be abrupt, that will not make people walk out and say, I'm never coming back here again, is to do an element every once in a while for a couple of months. So, switch up the call worship. Or use some music from the faith music, but use it week after week so that they learn it. So a sung response, I know, it's tedious, but you've got to learn your repertoire. That's how we do it, right? So sing a response to it at the prayer time that you sing for 4 Sundays in a row. Now you have a new element in your repertoire. This is what I would call blended worship. This is a less dramatic change to your worship services than you would make if you actually switched one out and did an alternative worship service. If you were going to do that, what I would recommend, and this was not my intention tonight, I was going to give you a set of action plans for you to go and talk about, and maybe we'll still do that before we leave, because I didn't want to give you a series of recommendations tonight, because I haven't seen you. I don't know what you look like in action. You know, I don't think it's responsible for me to give you a consultation without having lived with you for a little bit, but if you were going to switch one out, I would do it in a different location in the church or outside of the church. One of the things that you might want to try over the course of the summer is doing an alternative worship experience, like early on a Sunday evening. You know, some people call it Last Chance Mass, you know, something like that. But do something like 5 p.m. and follow it with barbecue. And so you're not only inviting people onto, you've got a great lawn, and it's right on the street. You know, talk about public witness, right? You could do an outdoor worship experience, grill some hot dogs and send everybody home, right? And you've not only had a worship experience, but you've fed people, you've had people, given people the opportunity for community. That is something that a lot of churches haven't had a great deal of success with. Something about taking people outside and having them sit, bring picnic blankets, take out folding chairs for people who can't sit on the ground, sit in a circle, create a worship center in the middle. If you have a license for it, you could do a bonfire, even kind of thing. A lot of people have had really good experience. That's a callback to our ancient tradition. That's how the first Christians worshiped. Remember where they were? They were outside, they were in caves, they were huddled around fires, they were sharing stories, they were coming as they were, right? That's ancient ritual. You're not doing something new there. You're reclaiming something that happened 2,000 years ago. I will never convince you. I swear. I will never convince you.
You'd be surprised. My son made a comment that it would be nice to be able to go when it's not sport related, it's not including in sports. And I said, when would you go? You know, maybe Saturday afternoon or Saturday evening. Sunday evening would probably work just as well because he's playing soccer and basketball on Saturdays and Sundays.
Do you do 2 services all summer?
Absolutely.
You go to a 10 o'clock. So it might be interesting for you to brainstorm about doing something at 10 and something at 5. And the something at 5 is on the portable instruments that happens outside. Or it's done a cappella. You know, there are lots of opportunities to try a variety of things. The thing about doing that kind of worship experience is if you've done 2.5 months of it, then when you bring some of the elements that you've done outside into your traditional worship, they're not that foreign. Right? So you've done, and what is helpful about doing it in a down time, in sort of a down programmatic time, is it gives people another opportunity to gather. Right? You're not necessarily doing Sunday school or Bible study. I don't know what you do in the summer. But most churches go to sort of an abbreviated schedule. But now you're adding something that's even more interesting. And for families with young children to go to a place that would feed them some dinner on a Sunday night, I mean, I would have done that in a heartbeat. You know? And it wouldn't be hard and it wouldn't be expensive. You could do that, you know, put out a basket, put in a couple bucks. What does a package of hot dogs cost, you know? And I'm not suggesting hot dogs, but, you know.
Yeah, another thing, I have 2 kids in their 40s, and they're not kids anymore. And one said that she thought it would be great to surprise us, you know, have somebody come and do something really dazzling and different, not the normal. I said, as long as it doesn't include drums, I'm okay. We bring drums a little bit, but just one number, not a whole service. I can deal with all kinds of stuff.
Well, if you do something, if you decide to go try something like this, and when I say try, I don't want you to just try it. I want you to do it. You know, like get in it. You know, stand in it. You know, and you could do lots of things outdoors. You could do a service of remembering your baptism and have kids have everyone walk through a wading pool. Right? there's so many fun things you can do with something like that. And if you do something like that for a while, it sort of expands people's possibilities of what might happen in here. And maybe even desire for something different to happen in here. That said, I would just caution that whoever leads that stuff outside, don't say, oh, the youth group can do it. Don't say, yeah. Don't say, oh, Scott will do that with two of his good friends. It's got to be a team that looks like you. Because it's got to belong to everybody. Does that make sense to people?
Yes.
When I've been asked in churches to do something alternative and then said, oh, the youth group can do it. Why? Because they're the only ones that should take a risk. They're the only ones who have any imagination or any creativity. They're the only ones who want to feel something different. None of that is true, right? Plus, it's just not fair. Like, your 13 to 17-year-old should take on the burden of transforming your church. No, I mean, that's just not fair. So if you're going to try something like that, it's got to be an all-in with the leadership of the church being willing to take that on. Not only willing, but excited. You hear what I'm saying? Like, the difference between needing to do something to save your church and wanting to do something to expand your experience of God are two different things. Now, they can work together, and my hope is that if you expand the possibilities for a greater, huger, more transformative experience of God, that will do what you're hoping it will do for your church. But, I mean, to me, the end goal is not that. It's not saving buildings, it's not saving, parking lots, it's not putting on new roofs, it's not any of that. I know it's important. But to me, and you named it, Wes, very early in this conversation, to me it's making disciples for Jesus Christ who will transform the world because we've been transformed.
That's what I was going to say, the other risk of not doing something is not living our mission.
What your son is experiencing on Friday night is the kind of thing that we want here, but he's experiencing that in community. Right? He goes to see the people who go to be a part of that experience.
Right.
So if we're going to create this experience on a Sunday evening, we're going to need to be sure there's community there to be able to use. Does that make sense to everybody? I think, so what I would, before we leave this conversation, I'll show you a few things since your poor pastor has worked for hours. Because I know you wanted to talk some about your space, right? That's what I was told. You wanted to talk some about your worship aesthetic in this space, am I right?
What's that?
A worship aesthetic? So one of my passions is preparing space for worship. So that we don't walk in and it looks like this every time we walk in here. But we walk in and we're startled by expectation that something other than what happens every day of our lives is going to happen here. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? So when we talk about creating worship that goes from the gathering to the ending with some sense of continuity, of clarity, of thematic tracing, we're talking about the space matching that. So you have a very traditional space, lots of people do. There are a lot of things you can do here, and I'm very excited about your balcony, because that brings in a lot of possibilities for what you can do here. And anyone who's been to annual conference, others have been there?
The whole altar requires that is.
Well, that's the work I do. That's the work I do at annual conferences. We raise the ceiling, we create a sacred canopy, we do a lot of, when you walk into that space, what's your expectation? Yeah. It's exciting. Something's happening here. Someone cared enough about the space to prepare for the Holy Spirit to enter with us. Now that's work too. So, let's see what we've got up there. You can go to the yellow. Do you want to go to the, yeah. We'll just walk through some of these pictures. So every altar that we worship at Drew is a new altar. Nothing ever gets left on the altar, everything gets taken away. And then when we come in the next time, we look at what the liturgical form is, we look at what the scripture is for the day, we think about who's preaching that day, and we recreate the altar. Now that might mean that some of your sacred cows are going to get put under the altar, and I have strategies for you to think about what to do with those. But what you want to do is create a space where there's a sense of anticipation, where there's a sense that something that is out of the ordinary is going to happen there.
You did something like that one Lent. During Lent, the altar filled with symbols that surrounded our study that we were doing.
Oh, yeah.
Like the God of I Am, we had a burning bush, or we had a Christmas tree, or Christmas tree. There was the stone, and there was a stone, Christmas time, that rolled away. There was a sheep one day. I forget what the other 12 symbols were, but there were 7 symbols by the end of Lent that all had to do with the messages that were what we were both hearing on Sunday, plus we were studying Sunday. So kind of.
And they tied into children's time, right?
Tied into children's
And it was
time.
eye-catching.
Yeah.
It was something new to look at, like, oh, yes, that's right, and I remember last week, it was,
Well, how often do you want to
Put it in
be?
context, I don't think there was any resistance to it. It wasn't like it was there for a show. It was there because we were there for a reason.
You know, I need to tell you that the first time I tried this in a local church, I was the associate pastor at Chatham, which is not unlike this community, right? And I said to the senior pastor, who was Paul Mallow at the time, I'd really like to do something with this space that's really dramatic for the season of Advent. And I bought 300 yards of gold tissue linen. And you have a big sanctuary here. Chatham seats 550 people. So if you've been in it, it's just a gigantic space, and it's got transoms, very wide. I think there's 6 feet wide transoms on the side. So it's just a huge space. And Chatham, like many other Methodist churches, right, is losing. It's not the size that it was when I went there as an 8-year-old, when we'd have 1,000 people at Easter services on Sunday morning, right? So say we've got, even if we have 300 people in the sanctuary, there are a lot of empty pews. So how does the back of the sanctuary get joined to the front of the sanctuary? What do we do to make that space a sacred canopy that we're all sitting under worshiping together? Because no matter how few people there are in the sanctuary, you're going to have people sitting in the back. So I bought this tissue lame, and we don't have the benefit of balcony like you do, but we hang a giant wreath on the cross with a dove on it for the Christmas, for the Advent season. And I took this tissue lame, and I took it around the cross, through the wreath, and I draped it. We've got these beams that come across like this. It's an A-frame kind, and I draped it from beam to beam all the way back in a way that it would sway when the heat came on. So every time the heat blew, all of this gold tissue remained moved. Now, that could have been a real crapshoot, right? I spent $600 on this fabric. It came out of the worship budget. I got the agreement from the senior pastor. I worked with a guy who was in theater design, who happened to be in the audience, or in the congregation. He helped me install it. It took us like 6 hours the day after Thanksgiving, because that was the first Sunday in Advent, was that Sunday. And people walked in and stopped at the door. So people are walking into church and they're stopping like this. And they're just looking at this fabric, because the space was transformed. Right? I didn't hear a single grumble, not from anybody. And it stayed up for those 4 weeks of Advent, and then we took it down. You're creating a space where God is going to do something different today. You're allowing for that to happen, and you're creating anticipation as people walk into that space that's going to open their hearts to it. It was done well. It was attractive. It wasn't in anybody's way. It was simply canopying the top of the ceiling so that people felt like they were warm, they were embraced, and something special was going to happen. It would be very easy for you to do something like that here. You've got the
It's
cross.
not without tradition. I mean, on Holy Thursday, we reenact the Last Supper across the
Yeah, see?
I mean, that's what we do. So it's not something that would be so drastically different than what we do other times.
In high holy,
It's not.
in high holy seasons, right, we tend to do more dramatic things. Well, why shouldn't every Sunday be a high holy day? It takes a lot of work. I will tell you that. But it's work that's well done. And in fact, my guess is that if you do an assessment of the people in your congregation, you're going to find people who find that work joyful. And in fact, a discipline, a spiritual discipline. And if you get that group of people together and they're passionate enough about it, they will do the kind of research that makes it really theologically sound. You know, I have two rules about worship. There has to be a scriptural foundation, and it's got to be theologically sound. And when I say theologically sound, that's theologically sound for this context. Right? Every church has a theology. If you haven't identified that, if you haven't stated that, it might be in your mission statement, it might be in your vision statement once you get it after all this work. But that should somehow guide what you do in your sacred time together on Sunday mornings. So now that we've done all this work, I don't know if we're going to show, I mean, you can scroll through the pictures if you want. I suggest that you look at this. There are videos of every worship service that we do on this. And actually, let me show you a little bit of an example of a blended service. Can you find Tuesday, I don't think today is up yet, but maybe Tuesday, March. It would be a Tuesday when there's a band. If you can find a band. Mark will be leading it. But one of the things that we do on Tuesdays now at Drew is that we do 3 gathering songs. One is usually a traditional hymn. The other 2 are more praise songs that come out of the book that they sing. And that's one way that we're building a repertoire. Then we go into a scripture reading, some kind of a message, not necessarily our ritual response is a time of prayer, which includes the Lord's Prayer, and a Son Lord's Prayer, which is Mark's Son Lord's Prayer, which is what we usually do. And then we'll do some kind of a sending forth ritual, which usually invites us to engage each other somehow. One of the ways that you build community is by having people learn each other's names, right? So one of the things we like to do is say, find someone you don't know that well, and spend 30 seconds talking to them as we prepare to leave this place. And then closing, again, with another traditional song. So there's a blended service, very simple. Takes us half hour from beginning to end, including a message and the reading of scripture and a time of prayer. Very streamlined, very simple. But it includes both traditional and less traditional elements. Less traditional elements that are going to become part of our community repertoire. I don't know who's going to have any left. But you guys can scroll through this Facebook page, and every day new videos go up. So I would recommend that you go visit the Drew Worship page and see what you see there. And I'm not suggesting that it's a be-all and end-all. I'm just suggesting that it might give you some ideas about how you might move forward. So I've done a lot of talking. We've done a lot of conversation and touching on ideas. What are some action steps as you move forward in thinking about how you're going to move your worship experiences that you want to consider? 4 action steps.
You need a group of people who are willing to work on it.
You're going to identify a group of people who are excited, engaged, passionate about developing. What are they working on?
They're working on something that is acceptable to everybody, that is innovative and exciting.
Can I ask you if you're willing to make an edit?
Sure.
In that statement? I'm concerned that if you try to make something acceptable to everybody, that you're going to create something that's not where you want. I I mean, what's that, that you can't please everyone? You've got to develop something that is theologically strong, scripturally based, and that is going to somehow enhance the program you already have. Or replace part of that program, right? So you're going to identify a group of people who are going to move forward with that. Now, part of what I would be excited to hear this group say is that you're going to trust that group of people to be the primary shapers of that without a lot of, right? I'm saying, I've done this kind of work in churches before. If you're not going to trust this group of people and empower them to move forward, they're going to spin their wheels.
We've done this a couple of times before. And it is not working.
And so what I'm going to suggest is that we develop a strategy that's going to help it work better.
I have to say this, I am one of the oldest, and I don't want to see a lot of the older people leaving the church because it has become something unrecognizable. This church would not be able to sustain, we wouldn't be able to make it if the remaining people that are maybe borderline, if they say this is not what I signed up for.
Well, would you not want to see new people come in? And
I do
people are known
want to see new people come in.
to the Lord.
But I don't think we should throw out what we've got. We have to.
Nobody's saying that we're going to throw them out. We're just going to change it up a little bit.
Well, and you might not change everything up. You may leave your 11 o'clock service exactly as it is.
I really, and this is me just going into action mode, and I apologize, but I kind of look at the summer as an opportunity to experiment. Keep the 10 o'clock as it is. We know what we're doing, but then really capitalize on the kids that are back from college, the youth, not that they're going to run a 5 o'clock Sunday assembly, but it's an opportunity for people of all generations to come back and see one another. Then they can go out or do whatever they're going to do after we gather, after we have a meal together or an ice cream social or something that's easy and successful. Something that we can point to and say, we had a fun summer. And then we can build, like, I can see a 9 o'clock and an 11 o'clock as is. I could see us moving just to one service at 10 o'clock throughout the whole year and keep it more as it has been. But I also see a real need to get the kids off the soccer field, and I have a bunch, on Saturday and Sunday morning, and offer something to families who want to worship together. A Saturday night or a Sunday twilight, something. Because that's where the multi-generations can come in, whether it's everyone then goes to dinner afterwards or some, that's just me going into action mode, and I'm not trying to say that's what we should do, but for me, I think the summer presents us an opportunity, but it also gets us moving. Because we can sit here for another 2 years and think that we'll enter into something. But we need to start doing something. And maintaining. Because I see the merits to both.
As I said, at the outset, really what we want to do is not dismantle, but preserve, or not preserve either, but take what we have that has brought us thus far, see how we can improve it to do it better. If you're on a worship team, I think it's excellence in worship, so how can we do it better? But then also provide a separate setting. And there are really just 3 times of the year which lend themselves to experimentation, which is the summer, September, and January, really. And the summer, I think, since we go to one service on Sunday morning, to get a group of people, as Tanya suggested, and we talked about this in a couple of different circles around the church, doing something in the evening. Saturday, we have the Saturday night group that meets here, so that kind of precludes us from doing Saturday night, but Sunday evening, and I like to think of meal thing, that'd be fun, and, something like that. But whatever it is, provide that ultimate setting, because there are a number of people who can't make it Sunday mornings, because of sports or whatever, but they probably would like to worship. Take this opportunity to really brainstorm what we can do. We've got that great tent that we have, and, have the tent up there all summer, and it'll be just wonderful. So,
Oh, have a bad
listen, don't say anything to me.
Well, and I would say that one of the things that we're starting to think about in theological education is how are we public theologians? We know that people aren't coming inside buildings like this. So how do we take this message outside? And something like a public witness on your lawn, as conspicuous as you can make it, is going to show people that there's something lively happening here. Right? So you're going to identify this group, right? Second, we're going to do 4 action items, and I know you moved to action. I don't know if that's what you want to add to your list, or is that part of the charge of this group?
This is not, again, this is...
No, I'm just pointing to Charlotte because that was her idea, but we were gonna work to identify a group that was gonna work on this, right?
Well, I think the charge is to develop something for the summer that moves us forward and see what happens.
And I think there needs to be some sort of assessment. It's got to be a SMART plan, right?
Yeah.
So what's the assessment aspect of that? Right, so what's the third thing? So you've done the summer thing, now what happens? What's the third part of the action plan? So you're going to do the assessment and evaluation and decide if it's something you're going to sustain, or is it going to evolve into something else? Is it going to evolve into one of your Sunday morning worship services, or is it going to maintain its own identity? Are you going to talk about your Sunday schedule in a way that alters how you worship? I've served large, medium, and small churches. The most energy for me is when everyone's in the room at the same time. And if you're not filling the space, there's no reason to think about not going to one service. Now, I know that's radical and even heretical, but I think if your 2 Sunday morning worship services don't have distinct identities, if you're doing the same service twice, that you ought to think about why you're doing that.
We're only doing it because people like it.
Well, do they? That's the other thing to think about.
It's tradition.
Often the 8 o'clock people like to come at 9, and the 11 o'clock people come to 11. But during the summer, we do it at 10.
And people
We're
come,
thinking
right?
about continuing it, because you're right, you don't fill the space. The 9 o'clock people don't know the 11 o'clock people, we're very disjointed. Bring everything together, it's gonna...
I would say even worse, it's the same 23 people who are in this room, who sing in the choir, who are doing bells, who are doing coffee hour, who are helping with worship. It's the same 23 people. And if you're in multiple choirs, you're here, great, Scott, it's fabulous. But you're here, from 8 till 1 every Sunday. And Chris, and it gets tough when there's 7 people.
Sunday school programs and staffing 2 Sunday schools for 2 children to show up. And,
You're staffing 2 Sunday schools.
we've got 2 full Sunday school programs.
It's not hard to staff the teachers. The kids aren't coming. I have the teachers that are coming every Sunday that they are assigned, and they're all prepared, and they know, and we've talked. And I said, listen, if you have 2 kids, you're going to teach 2 kids. We're going through this, we're doing the best we can.
So, part of this for you all is preservation of your people, right? You're going to burn these folks out. And there's nothing sort of less appealing than coming, having prepared. I'm not a big head counter, but there has to be a critical mass for things to happen. 2 kids are nice in a room, but what can you actually make work with that number of kids, unless you're going to do a small Bible study or something, which is fine, but is that the kind of engaging education program you want to have? I just want to put that out there because I watch churches do this, that you try to sustain all this programming, and your folks are loyal and they're going to be here. Is that what you want to do? Is that really what you want to do? Why not have one service and have this like bursting at the seams church school? And then that's what's exciting to parents who are bringing their kids for the first time.
And bursting to Sunday school, attract more kids.
That's what I'm saying, is,
The same thing for worship.
yeah,
Because there's come in, there's 12 people who are praying like this because they're all scattered throughout the congregation. Or when, like on Easter, you have everybody in here, voices, it's like the angelic choir. And a visitor comes with that, that's a whole different story. That's when they, something happened here, I want to come back to this.
well, and that, there again lies the rub. So a visitor comes on Easter, they've had this bang-up experience, right? They come the next Sunday, which we know is going to be a luxury anyway. And they're sitting here with 11 people, their kid is one or one other kid is in the Sunday school. What does that say? So, and I'm not suggesting that you can make every Sunday consistent. I'm not suggesting that. But I am suggesting that you put your energies in the places that make the most sense for you going forward. In that assessment piece that you're going to do after the summer program, I would think about what your fall program's going to look like. And that it doesn't have to radically change right away. Maybe you change it during the Advent season and see how that looks. The high holy seasons are good times to try new things because people are in that anticipatory mode anyway. And then what's the fourth thing? How does this become part of your vision statement? This theology of worship.
The word I heard was public witness to worship. I like that whole concept idea. I know I'm a sales guy and I've been advertising and marketing my whole career. And you don't advertise, you don't sell anything. So I think the idea of doing some kind of public witness that starts in the summer, extends over into the fall and spring a little bit.
What do we got with?
I'm not sure, but I think we
usually
can
active.
identify and investigate what we can do a public witness to worship.
Well, I think we've talked about it in some, maybe with Ad Council. It's getting a PR person. It's actually marketing the fun that we're having, the stuff that we're doing, the missions the work that we're doing on behalf of something bigger than us.
I don't know what you're really talking about in terms of a PR person, but I am a PR person. That's what I used to do. And my husband jokes, yeah. No, but my husband jokes that I'm still in PR. I'm just spinning a different story. We're all PR people.
I know.
We're all PR people. That's what we do as disciples. We go out and tell the good news. That's our job.
We're
Right?
a communications person though, too.
To manage your Facebook and
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah,
else
I
you're
mean, we've
doing.
got somebody that manages Facebook, but he's a technology guy. And we need somebody, and my son, when he started working, he was working for a small .com company. And he had an English literature degree, he decided to do computers. And we rewrite everything that the engineers and everything that everybody else did. And became like one of the more valuable guys in the entire company. Because he changed the perspective of the company from being a techie company to being a company to reach out to. And that's kind of what, we've got a good basis for communications on the internet, but we don't have somebody to write up all the stuff. And write in a way that will capture
The hearts and minds of people.
56 characters, whatever it is, that need to be able to capture the minds and the millennials beyond walls.
Yeah, but most of what you're going to communicate is going to be online now, right? I mean, you might be able to get some visual stuff on your lawn that people drive by. My kids don't read the newspaper. I don't know if your kids do, or they might read it online, but...
Mine do, very much.
But I think, so once you decide what these programs are going to look like, you are going to decide how to let people know they're happening. But I think the more visually impactful you can make them in terms of just drive-by traffic, that's going to be helpful.
But
So,
Tanya,
yeah.
and I appreciate that, but we also, let's say it's Sunday at 5 o'clock, just throwing that out. We also need to market it internally.
Oh, sure.
And that, the message from one service to another doesn't people disappear and that message from 9 to 11 may not get through. I mean, Scott does a consistent job and all of that, but it's the undertow, we don't, as a congregation, we do not have a mission right now. I mean, we don't have a clear vision of where our church is going, and that's part of what our vision committee is trying to help deliver, so people can focus and come together. Because right now we're very disjointed. So a PR person, a communications person, will actually have a theme that goes through and wraps around everyone in the congregation, so they feel a part. They may not come ever Sunday night at 5 o'clock, but they can be excited for the excitement that's coming out of that. And at the 9 o'clock or 11 o'clock or 10, whatever it is, we can be excited, all of us, for a baptism in our sanctuary, because that means our church is living and breathing.
I'm not downplaying the need for a communications person, and in fact, most churches are going away from an administrative assistant to a communications person. That's how they're really restructuring that role. But what I am saying is that you're also the communications people. So if you're going to want people who are not here already to come on a Sunday evening, it's because you ran into a friend at the grocery store and said, we're going to have this thing tonight at the church. It's going to be really fun. Bring the kids. It's going to be a half hour of singing and worshiping, and then we're going to have dinner. And I would caution you to think about how you frame that worship experience so it really truly is a half hour. You can do a lot in a half hour. And we're at the point, and Scott, I know you know this, where we're in the TED Talk mode of preaching, which is an 8 to 10 minute sermon. That's the length of attention we're getting. And we got to keep it good to get that. So,
Everyone familiar with TED Talk? TED Talk. So TED Talk started on the West Coast, and it happens usually at like Google or Facebook or whatever, but it is thought leaders coming into an open environment. Could be a cafeteria, it could be an auditorium, but focused on an issue and presents. It could be 45 minutes, but over the last couple of years, it's getting closer and closer to 18, 19 minutes. And it's big thoughts and impactful statistics and revolutionary things that can really alter how you feel about something you never had any feeling about. I mean, they're really pretty good, and they're available and they're free. So TED Talks.
So what we're talking about is developing something that's interactive, that's exciting, that's inclusive, that models something that morphs into something else for you. If you want to try something sooner than that, Pentecost is always a good Sunday to think about doing something big and bright and colorful and balloons, and you may have done some things like that here, or challenge everyone to wear red, or, there are lots of ways you can handle that. That's in May. It's coming right around the corner. It's a good, do you do confirmation on Pentecost? So, I mean, there are some big high holy days coming up that would give you, and Pentecost might be the day that you launch the summer program and say, here's what we're going to do, starting June 15th, whenever you go to your 10 o'clock service.
June 17th. June 17th. Sorry, I stand corrected, May 17th, sorry.
May
May 17th.
17th, we're doing the
Is that 10 o'clock?
10 o'clock.
No.
It's the 24th, because we're doing the combined service for the celebration.
Right.
And then the 24th normally would be our 10 o'clock service.
Correct.
So we're starting a week
Is that
early.
10 o'clock, Memorial Day weekend?
I believe it is.
Yes.
Probably not good.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, but it's so early. If that is Memorial Day weekend, I have to look at my calendar, but it's so early that I don't think we're gonna have people taken off the shore necessarily. But anyway, so those are core things that you're gonna look at. I am happy to come back and have more conversation with you as you start to develop this programming if you want to. Look at the Drew Worship Facebook page and see if it gives you any ideas. If you want to just give me a call, I'm glad to offer you some more ideas, or I would encourage you to bring a team as you have in the past to Summer Music Institute, where Mark and I are really going to be laying out a philosophy of worship called trans, working across generations, working across cultures, working across theologies, working across. So, are there any questions I can answer for you before we wrap up tonight?
Thank you, give us something to think on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I
Definitely.
hope so. And I'm not suggesting ever that you throw out what is working or what you are deeply tied to strictly to experiment with something new. Whatever you do has to be deeply thought out. It has to be well executed. And it needs to have a theological grounding and a scriptural grounding. So I just would invite you into this really creative, expansive space where God is working in and through you to bring something new to a community that you know needs it. And that's what I think that we need to believe, is that there are people out there who need to know this story. I mean, it's a life-saving, life-giving story. So why are we keeping it here? And if we really believe in it, we may have to give up something that means something to us. For the sake of tradition's sake, that means something to us.
Well, Tanya, thank you. And as Meryl said, there's a lot to think about. And, there's a lot of discussion. Worship is, we can talk about the building, people have their preferences. We can talk about, programs, and people have preferences. But when it comes to worship, it's a very emotional issue quite often and difficult to talk about. But these are the types of forums, and it's a shame that more people here, because we start thinking about things and people don't show up. When you go to implement some experiments or changes, like, well, why didn't anybody tell us? So you are the messengers to bear some of the news and to maybe probe folks and see how folks are thinking and move the message forward that the reason we're here to worship is to worship God, and the reason the church exists is to make disciples of Jesus Christ, which is taking care of and nurturing those who are in the church, but also going out into the community or out into the community to make disciples of Jesus Christ to people who aren't here. So we need to have a foot in both, and worship, of course, is kind of the big event, so to speak, where you will attract the most people. So how can we make that work for both groups? And that's a great thing to think about. Let me offer a word of prayer today as we wrap up tonight. Gracious God, Lord, we thank you for this evening and this opportunity to talk about worship, Lord. And to remind us, Lord, that worship is not about us, but it is about you. As how we can honor and glorify you as we come together, as we come into your presence, Lord, as we feel your Spirit wash among us, and we just feel your presence in an intimate way, perhaps that we don't feel at other times. But it's also an opportunity, Lord, for us to learn more about you, to deepen our relationship, and to invite others to come into that relationship as well. And so, Lord, let your Spirit work in our hearts and our minds with the information that we've discussed this evening. And may it come to fruition, Lord, in a way that will glorify you, that will bring people into a relationship with Jesus Christ, that will honor you in all that we do. And we thank you, Lord, for Tanya coming this evening, Lord, and sharing her gifts with us. And we know that she's been in a retreat for the past couple of days. She's exhausted. But she's willing to come and share with us tonight as well. So we pray, Lord, that you would give her traveling mercies as she heads home this evening, Lord, and give her rest this evening so tomorrow she can get up and serve you once again. And we pray the same for us as well. For together we all serve the one risen Christ, and we are all sisters and brothers in Jesus Christ. And it is in his name and to his glory that we live and pray this evening.